Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron. Joel, I give you permission to introduce our next topic.
Very, very funny, Aaron, because our topic today is roles and permissions, but it also is a nice peek into our dynamic where I just do everything you tell me to do, and so life is good. So yeah, one of the core things that I'm trying to think if there's any app we've ever built that doesn't need some sort of user permissions, and I can't think of one other than maybe a hobby project here or there. But needless to say, it's something that is frequently needed in an application. If you're going to have users, you need to have some way of defining what those users can do. And so maybe today we could kick around the tools we use, the strategies we use for that, and share some tips.
Yeah, I think from a high level, when you say, these permissions, what we're really talking about is authorization, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have authentication, which is who is doing this thing, or do we not know? And then we have authorization as then that entity or that state of being, can they have this ability to do something, whatever that is. And then sometimes we have a context, which is to what? Can they do this to what? Like, can they edit this post, or can they just see posts or whatever? So we're talking really more when we say permissions, we're really talking about authorization. And then inside of there, we have Laravel gates and Laravel policies, things like that. Right. But I think we really kind of want to focus today on roles and permission setups, specifically how to really make use of those, and then what you should be checking for and what are those best practices.
If I go to the Laravel docs and I search for roles and permissions, I don't think I'm going to find anything. So what are we, are we going to talk about a specific package?
Yeah. This kind of applies to all, any sort of roles and permission system you'd set up. But, right. The trusted one that we kind of reach for is so I think it's actually called Laravel permissions. It's it's a package by Spady, or I'm not entirely certain. As a person who has a last name that gets mispronounced very often, I just want to say I'm sorry already for whatever I've done to that name. But you've probably heard of their company. Yeah. They do a lot of work in the Laravel world. So
absolutely,
that is the package I normally reach for and then start to configure.
Okay, yeah, but like you said, even though that's what we use, whether you're rolling your own system or using a different package, like the general principles will still apply.
Mm-hmm. So I think when we look at those, there's two building blocks. We kind of talk about it. It's roles and permissions.
Mm-hmm.
So roles are a delicious food that I like to have with my turkey.
Do you butter them?
But also, roles are a type of thing that a person can be. So you can be an admin, you can be an editor, you can be a salesperson, a support staff, all those different things.
Sure.
And so it's just really kind of a description. And then when we look at our users, which we can apply this to anything, you could apply it to a company or a fish, whatever you want. But we tend to, only focus on users. You apply these roles, you can have, I guess a user could have no roles. They really can't do anything then. But they can have one to many roles. So a user, might just be an admin. But or they might be, they might be support staff, and they might do some sales for you. So maybe they're sales staff, and maybe they are a tester, so they might have a test role or something. You can have all these different roles attached to a person.
I'm following you so far. And so the other, maybe I'll jump in and contribute a little something here. So the other big aspect of this is permissions, which is what specifically can or cannot be done. So like if we're going to use the mental model of a blog, and a blog has posts and a post has authors. So like a permission would be, can I create a post, or can I delete a post? Things like that, very specific things. They don't necessarily have to be tied to a database resource either. So a permission might be, can I see this entire feature in the application, or something along those lines. So they can be really high level, or they can be very, model / policy specific, things like that.
I noticed you didn't make a food pun with yours. So
Persimmons? Like I think role is an easier
Okay.
is an easier pun to make than permissions. But
All right.
point
So
taken.
and in general, you apply permissions to roles.
Right.
You can say that this role, maybe a blog author role, has the permission to create posts and to edit posts and to delete posts. And I should kind of take a quick aside. You're not just saying because they have edit post permission they can edit every post. You'd probably
Right. Yep.
mix this technology with policies. So you'd
Mhm.
want to check, do they have permission to even edit posts, and then do they have a form of ownership of this post that
Correct.
they
Yep.
can do it to this thing. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Can I put an aside on your aside?
yeah,
One of the things I like about the Laravel permissions package is it actually builds on top of Gates. So it's you're not doing a whole separate thing. Like you can easily mix and match these things in Gates and policies where you might normally use them in Laravel without a package like that. So, but yes, your
that's
point
true.
is very valid that there's more to it than just can you do this thing or not.
Yeah, and that's because gates are more of a simple sort of thing, and policies
Yeah.
are kind of a little bit more complex.
Mhm.
And roles and permissions, even though they can have a complex hierarchy and a collection of them, they're actually just pretty simple.
Why wouldn't just to I know what your answer is going to be, but why wouldn't you you assign a permission directly to a user? Why do you do it to a role?
Well, you can assign it to a user. The functionality exists like in this
Mhm.
package, and there's definitely been a few times when maybe that's something you could do for a very specific one-off.
Mhm.
Um, but normally you'd have to have basically decided that all the other solutions are not the right way to do it first.
Yeah.
But it's because you want to apply these permissions to roles, so that way you can reuse the permissions on other
Mhm.
roles, and you can change and interact. And for example, let's just say maybe you have a sales role, and in that sales role has the ability to view sales summary data and view sales detail data. Those are two
Mhm.
permissions on that role. And later on, you decide, I want to maybe have another role, or not all the users I want to see the detail because they don't need to. They should just be selling. Um,
Oh,
if you had assigned it to individual users, you'd have to find all the users that now have those,
yeah.
kind of make up decisions on whether they should have them or not, and alter them and whatnot. Whereas with roles, you just kind of say, all right, that role should have it or not. And if I want to assign it to other people, I'll make two roles: sales role and sales manager role. And those will have different, collections of permissions, or overlap or share some of the same ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's a maintenance issue. If you start doing direct assignments of permissions to users, it very quickly gets out of hand. Whereas roles are kind of a nice grouping and easier to think about as you maintain the app long term.
Well, another aside I'd say on that one, because we're doing asides all in this episode, I guess,
Okay.
is as a programmer, you have to remember that your business users are probably going to communicate to you as permissions. They're going to say, I want Joel to have this permission. Just because they say that and that's the business language they understand doesn't
Mhm.
mean that that's the way you program it.
True.
You're
Yeah.
responsible for programming a thing that gives them that end result, but you're also responsible for having a quality code base and doing stuff. And on the flip side, you could tell them once you've made a role for that, and that a user has that role, but don't have that argument with them. Well, it's not, just say, yep, he has a permission or she has permission now to do that,
Yeah.
as you've requested. And they don't
Hmm.
need to get into details.
Agreed. 100%. Yep. So we've talked mostly concepts and how to assign roles and permissions, but like the flip side of this is how do we check them? Any tips and tricks on strategies for doing that effectively?
Yeah. I think I'm going to kind of go way back before this topic
Okay.
and real touch on authentication real quick. It can
Hmm.
be really easy to, when you're first starting something, just say, well, all users can do this thing. So I'll just check for an authenticated user. And if the user is authenticated, then they can do this thing.
Okay.
And there's a lot of caveats, and that's like a whole different discussion on why that's a bad idea. But really, just, we're going to do authorization. And then authorization really is checking a permission to do something. And so we want to check our permission level details on something. So we want to check to see if this user authenticated or not or whatever, has this permission. The reason I brought up authentication, checking for a user or not, is because it's also easy to fall into the trap of maybe I'll just check for the role. Like if you're a role of salesperson, you obviously have all access to this. And I'd say that's not true. And that's going to cause you some issues, again, if you're programming on that role, that bucket of stuff, because what if roles change, or what if, permissions for a role change? So you're saying like salespeople used to be able to see salespeople used to be able to make support entries in our FAQ. So we gave them permission on that role. If a role is support or a role of sales, you can edit FAQs, right?
Yep.
Well, maybe now we only want certain salespeople, the sales manager. So now we have to go back and, edit that code every single place to find that sales role and change it to, sales manager role. Whereas if we had checked permission for, can create FAQ in our one place where we define where permissions are, managed, we would just make a different role and assign that to the proper people and just kind of move stuff around there, one place, and that works perfectly.
I've definitely learned that one the hard way. It's tempting to think in roles, especially when that's how you're creating the permissions. But like you said, checking the permissions is much, much easier to maintain than checking roles all over the place.
When we're checking for permissions, I want to make it also clear that we're checking for a permission. We're checking for permission to do a thing. We're not checking that someone can't do a thing. Usually in these packages, they allow, they have allows or denies or things like that.
Right.
But I would say it's one of those things where we want to kind of develop an allow list. By default, everyone has no permission, or they can't do anything. And you only then allow people to do stuff. So check for permission versus saying, I allow everyone in here and I just won't show the button if I've set them up with a permission that says do not edit things. You want to have an allow sort of list, I guess is what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of a policy that another thing that we've learned the hard way is like sometimes it feels like checking for a denial makes more sense. It's more explicit, but you get into some weird circumstances trying to juggle that logic, and that's where security mistakes can happen too, is if you don't properly layer in your mind the allows versus denies, whereas if you just have one structured way of doing it, you don't have to do as much mental gymnastics to keep track of it.
Yeah.
Something else that we found useful for roles and permissions is something that's also called feature flags, which is basically, let's say you're developing a new feature and it's experimental, or it's not something you're quite ready to release to the world, but you want to get it out to a subset of your users and maybe even in the production environment. So a feature flag would allow you to toggle it on or off. And if you couple that idea with roles and permissions, it lets you toggle a feature on for just a specific set of users while you're in that testing mode.
Yeah, and that's where, like we talked about, you could have a role for that, or in very small, very segmented situations, you could then add that permission directly to a user or two that is, there's nothing special about them except for you just happen to know them. And they said that they would test this thing out for you and you have a good relationship with them or something. So, yeah. And I would add that if you're developing a roles and permission system and then you need feature flags, this is a way to do that. It's really nice. If you make your mind think of that direction. There are other services and things out there that are for like more complex feature flags.
Sure.
But we're talking about, just like the very first level here. Like there's no A and B testing with this. Right. There's no, reports when you're done or anything like that. But sometimes you just, you have to push something out and maybe you just kind of put a permission there instead of a bunch of if statements all over. Do you have to, remove? It could be as simple as just making one change and giving that permission then to every single user. And then later on, you can start to remove those permission checks because they're no longer necessary.
Yeah, really useful approach.
Joel, why do you think that aliens don't contact us if they exist?
Wait a second. What? They haven't?
Well, okay. but like if there is aliens, are there any reasons you could think why maybe they would just hold off on showing up and saying hi?
So they have access to our social media, and would that be part of their determination?
It could be.
Okay, that could be a reason. These guys seem a little iffy.
Well, they're probably seeing people that are tweeting stuff like bull in a China shop. It's like, no, it's bull, Bull,
What?
or like all intensive purposes.
Oh wow.
Like, no, it's all intents and purposes. Or a scapegoat. That was the one I heard the other day. I'm like,
Okay.
no, it's not an scapegoat. It's a scapegoat. So I think, yeah, if they have access to Twitter, they probably are like, nope, they're too de-evolved yet.
Twitter or maybe like ninth grade English essays, like things like that.
Or Netflix, right? So we get super proud, especially in America, about Independence Day. Yet if you watch that movie, all we do is kill aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of movies where all we do is kill aliens. Even some of our video games, it's like, there's some aliens. Let's just destroy them. And then I think probably the more realistic thing would be, I mean, and realistic in this topic is that maybe, like you said, maybe they have, but every time they try to contact us, anyone who brings it up, we label as sort of crazy.
Right.
And they're like, well, we have giant spaceships, so we have to land in Nevada and Utah, and where there's no people, because we're really trying not to destroy your towns like in all your movies.
It's a courtesy, really.
Yeah, and it's like, well, why did one guy out in a trailer in Nevada is the one that they chose to talk to? Well, they are probably surprised too. Like, where is everybody? I guess we'll talk to Billy Bob. If you need help developing a permission system that's both secure but flexible, we can help.
Head over to our website at nocompromises.io and book a free consultation call.